This guy had pretended that he was a wealthy heir working in the dangerous diamond business. And so after he'd been dating one woman for a while, he'd explained that he was in danger, send videos of his bodyguards bleeding, and tell his girlfriend that he needed to use a credit card in someone else's name so he couldn't be tracked. So according to the film, his girlfriend sent credit cards, took out loans and lines of credit, even flew suitcases of withdrawn cash to him in his time of need. He promised them he'd pay them back. Of course, they believed him, and he was the Prince of Diamonds, flew private everywhere, stayed at the fanciest hotels, and was always dripping in designer clothes. And he did pay them back with checks that bounced, fake watches and bank transfers that never went through. Little did each woman know that all the wealth they bore witness to had been paid for by the women who came before them, women who were by that time alone in debt and desperate for answers.
So the reality is only a little bit different than the movie. The reality is that the Tinder swindler, and he was an Israeli citizen, he specialized in check and banking fraud. So if you remember back a long time ago, Catch Me If You Can, the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, that was another example of a con man who specialized in check fraud. So the Tinder swindler is just a modern day version of that. So he specialized in this ability to make fraudulent checks and fraudulent bank transfers. So he would ingratiate himself with a wealthy family. It all started, my understanding is it all started when he actually was a babysitter for a wealthy family in Israel. And he stole the checkbook of that wealthy family and then left the child behind when he was supposed to be caring for the child. And that was kind of how he got his start. And then he started cashing their checks for himself. From there, he became a wanted criminal in Israel, and he was able to escape Israeli custody and then go to the West, where he just continued to con wealthy women, doing exactly what the Tinder swindler movie was about, getting their credit cards, getting their bank accounts, getting their check and getting their debit cards, and then running up their bills, always promising that there was a reason for it or conning them in some way, shape, or form. But specializing in this, his ability to basically cash checks a certain way so that nobody really knew when the check was being cashed or who owned the funds. And ultimately, he was wanted in multiple different countries, and he was young. I mean, this guy is about 31 years old when he was at the peak of his activity. After he was apprehended and they started looking at his life, what they realized is that he had actually been engaged in fraudulent check activity, fraudulent money activity, all the way back to his early teens, 13, 14 years old in Israel. And that a big part of that came because his parents were also party to criminal and illicit activities when he was growing up. So one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is that this spectrum, remember 10% of the American population falls under psychopath, sociopath, or narcissist. That 10% of people, the formula that makes them who they are is part genetic and part environmental. What kind of childhood do you have? What kind of parents do you have? What foundational emotions, what foundational survival instincts do your parents ingrain in you? In this case, the Tinder swindler was programmed with this sense of self-reliance, that you had to be nefarious, you had to be sneaky, you had to be a trickster, you had to lie. So his ethical compass was programmed completely different than the average person. Now, lying was needed to survive, right? And survival was, and success was defined by how effectively you lied and how much you stole. The average working class American family who's taught to believe in hard work and honesty and the pursuit of happiness, that is the total antithesis for them.
So fresh, so new.